All
All
right, looks
right.
like we are live.
Yes, I think we are. Welcome. So we'll see how people start to join in and trickle in. And hopefully
Yeah,
we'll get started shortly. There you
absolutely.
go.
Yeah, let's just give them a couple of minutes, and yeah, once we can see the chat is being fired up, we can start. But yeah,
I,
on that, Nicole, where are you joining us from?
I'm joining you guys from New York, the beautiful city of New York. I am here in our offices at Manifest Law.
That's very cool. Oh yes, New York would be a very interesting place around this time of the year, with Christmas around and lights and New Year's. Very happy. I'm currently joining from Chicago. Not very similar, but not very different at the same time as well. But yeah, I'm very excited to know where the folks are joining us from. So if you have just joined the webinar, please type it in the chat the city that you're joining us from, and the and we'll be very happy to begin very short.
Okay, we see Bay Area, we see Peru. That's really cool.
All right.
Also, please, guys, let us know if you have any technical difficulties, if you have any echoing. We can try to correct those things. Just let us know. I have a Dallas, I have an Austin, not too far from each other.
One from Boston
Austin.
as well.
NYC is unbeatable. Like, I don't think I could ever leave. I love this city too much. Even though I go back to my home country from time to time, like, I think about New York very quickly.
Oh yes, I was in New York. I would say not less than 4 months ago, and it was one of the most beautiful experience of my life. People joining from Atlanta, from Michigan. I'll just take maybe one more minute. Yeah, if there's any technical difficulties, guys, do let us know. Um, but just one last question that I would want to ask the chat is, what's your visa type right now? Are you guys on an H-1B, F1, STEM OPT? What's your visa type like? That would really help us answer your questions better. So let's see that. F1, F1
See if
OPT.
you have ones here.
H-1B, F1. I believe Yash is on day one CPT. Ready has H-1B approved. F1 STEM OPT on EAD. Yeah, so lots of people on F1 and H-1B currently, Nicole.
That seems pretty on par with like a lot of people that are here in the United States as immigrants, right? So
Absolutely.
let's see here. All
Interesting.
right. But it's good to see that there's a good mixture, right, between people who are already on work visas and people who maybe are getting work experience through their F1s or maybe in the middle of their studies.
Actually, right? Yeah, and this is very interesting data because even I'm currently on a F1 STEM OPT. So just makes sense as to where the majority of the audience is joining us from. But I believe, yeah, we are just on time. 6:35 there in New York. So let us actually dive right in, Nicole. Before that, I'll just quickly introduce you. But if I would let you introduce yourself. I'll quickly introduce me, and keep it very short. Hello, everyone. Firstly, thank you so much for joining. This is going to be a very interesting session, and a very helpful one for people who are on STEM, F1, H-1B. I believe many of you would be joining us from LinkedIn and YouTube. If you see me on LinkedIn, this is Sohan Sethi. I'm currently a data analytics manager at a major healthcare company, and I create content on LinkedIn, on job search, journey as an international student, resources to help you find a job. And I believe both of these are very relevant topics, especially in, in this year and day and age. But yeah, if you find that content helpful, I'm very happy that you're joining us over here. On that note, we have Nicole over here, who is nothing less than a superstar in itself. But having said that, Nicole, I would love for you to share more about what you do at Manifest Law and how we'll be helping the folks joining us today.
For sure. So my name is Nicole Gunara. I'm the principal immigration attorney at Manifest Law. Manifest Law is like a tech-enabled, tech-forward law firm. What we're aiming to do is redefine what it means to engage with legal practice, whether it's through radical transparency or in leveraging technology to make our cases more efficient, maybe even more powerful. But taking that step back and answering your other question of how can I best help you, or what's the purpose of today's conversation, is many of you have already mentioned you're in this vicious cycle of being on F1 and you're trying to rely on this upcoming H-1B lottery, or you're running out of time, or alternatively, you're already on an H-1B, but you feel you're really restricted on that H-1B. So really today's conversation is going to be, what's the alternative to that? What else can I rely upon, and what can I be doing in order to get those other options out of the way?
Awesome. And yeah, that is long story short, even I am currently on my F1 STEM OPT. And Nicole, I know for a fact that how important that this webinar can be, because even I got my initial two H1B lottery attempts rejected. So this is something that the audience would be learning, but I'll be learning from as well. So I really look forward to the conversation that we'll be having in the next 50 minutes. On that note, I would just want to dive right into what people signed up for, which is exploring H-1B backup options, or actually alternative options to the H-1B, to say it right. So, on that note, Nicole, what are some of the options for people who are currently on an H-1B, who maybe are on F1 STEM OPT just like me, and have gotten a couple of rejection results in the lottery. So, what are some of the fastest and the best options that people can actually opt for in a situation like this?
Right. So I think the number one visa that a lot of people like consider or like think about would be the O1, right? So the O1 is the extraordinary ability visa. A lot of the times when people hear about this, sometimes they completely remove themselves from the equation because they'll say, well, I'm like, what is the definition of extraordinary ability? And am I even someone that rises to that occasion? It can seem very, very intimidating, but there are ways to invest your time in the right places to build that appropriate foundation to make a strong attempt for the O1. Right. And then the second thing that I do want to touch upon for a lot of you out there is the benefits of a potential J1. I know many of you may be concerned about the J1 visa. It gets a lot of or a lot of bad rep, let's say, but there's actually wonderful STEM initiative related J1s that people really should be exploring that can get them longer term work visas in the United States. And we'll definitely really unpack that later on today's conversation.
Absolutely. And both of those are one of the best alternatives that I've found through my little bit of research as well. So let's first dive into the O1, Nicole. I have heard a lot that O1 is called the a talent visa, or just like you just mentioned, a extraordinary ability visa. What is the O1? If let's say someone is hearing about the O1 for the first time, how can someone aim to achieve an O1? What could maybe the timeline look like for them? What are some of the criteria that they need to fulfill? What's maybe in a nutshell, what's an O1 for someone just learning about it?
Right. So, like I mentioned earlier, an O1 is an extraordinary ability visa, but it's a non immigrant visa. So, it means that when you do achieve it, you get a temporary work visa to either work for a specific employer or alternatively a series of employers or engagements. There's kinds of O1s. There's an O1A for individuals who are business, athletics, sciences, education, engineering, and the like. And then there's also the O1B, which is really more for creatives. Both of them have different requirements, but functionally, what you need to do is prove 3 criteria out of a list of criteria that the government has set aside to determine whether or not you are considered extraordinary. For the O1A, there's essentially about 7 different options, or 7 to 8. I would say that there's like a comparable evidence argument, and you need to meet 3 of that listed items. And then for the O1B, there's 6 criteria that you can try to attempt and meet, and you need to meet at least 3. Once you win it, you get a 3-year work visa that can be renewed, and there's no limit to how long you can be in the United States cumulatively compared to, let's say, an H-1B, where there's a 6-year overall limit. Some of the criteria that I think your target audience would be most interested in under the O1A is, lead critical role at a distinguished organization. Have you ever worked in a capacity that is critical for a well-known company or a company of achievement? Another one is high remuneration. Are you paid more than others in your field, in your geographic location? And then there's also categories for scholarly articles. Have you published research papers before, or non-academic papers in well-regarded trade publications? Another one that's out there is judging. Have you judged in a panel? Have you ever judged in a jury? Is it peer review, or is it some sort of pitch competition or hackathon that you were sitting on that you judge something in that capacity? There's many different criterias that are out there, and what's most important, as like a preface before we go really deeply into which ones I would build into, or what is like the ideas that you guys should be doing, I would say that you need to read through the criteria and think to yourself, what can I do to meet it? They literally write the roadmap of exactly what they're looking for, so find ways to provide it, and I'll try to give a few tips on that.
Oh, that's excellent, and a great way for us to get just started about the O1 conversation. So I'm very curious to understand, Nicole, what are some of the criteria that actually stand out? Is it like, because I often get this question that, hey, is one criteria better than the other? Is it something that I only focus on this one? Let's say, for example, judging. Is there a higher possibility of getting the O1? What are your thoughts on that, and what are some of the key criteria that people can actually target, which is achievable in a
Mm, I wouldn't say that you get like a higher chance of approval by like doing certain criteria over another, but what I will say is that some criteria are easier to achieve than others, right? So to give a very clear example, as you mentioned it, judging. You would be surprised at how many judging opportunities there are, not only in the United States, but also internationally. The government doesn't discriminate between whether or not you were judging in the United States or virtually for a competition that's based out of Singapore or Hong Kong and the like. Judging opportunities are great. You can do peer review. For example, getting into those databases. Like, let's say you're on OPT or you're already got your master's degree. You can actually network with your professors who usually are already board members of an editorial journal of some format. Or alternatively, you join an organization like IEEE, and you become a senior member and you get into their CMA databases, and now you're going to start accumulating those peer review opportunities. Once you've done several of them, technically that checkbox is already met. You've done judging, you've done peer review. For hackathons and the like, there's a lot of research that can go into it, but I feel like we're in the day and age where ChatGPT is a thing, right? Use it as a research tool. I'm not saying you should rely on it as like a source of truth for writing your own applications or making legal interpretations, but it can help you collate information about upcoming competitions and how to apply to them and how to become a judge for every single one of them. Are not even just competitions, but maybe there are publications in your home country that are easier to get into than, say, Nature here in the United States if you're a biologist, right? So that can be a really good tool to give you like initial insights. But I think another category that's hidden that every single person here should be doing is actually scholarly articles. So scholarly articles seems like a huge lift, right? Because it's like, I have to do original research. I have to be in a lab, or have to do something that's so novel, and I have to write this crazy research paper that goes through a journal process, gets published like maybe a year or two from now. when the reality is that the government has allowed us to make arguments for non-academic publications, so long as one, your paper or whatever you submitted is well researched. It doesn't have to be original research, could be a well cited paper, one that you would presumably like submit in college or in your master's degree to a professor. Like, let's say you're proving that it's a better investment in manufacturing to work with Vietnam than China. You can say things like, according to this 2023 World Report, right? And you cite to it. So if it's well researched and it's published in a media publication or a trade publication that is targeted to other industry experts to review, like in this case, for the example I gave, imagine it was The Economist or maybe even the Financial Times. And it went through an editorial process, which it would be if it was in those publications. The government does allow us to make that argument that it's a scholarly publication, even though it's not a research journal. Those are much more easily achievable than the research publication. And I actually have a very, very good search term for every single one of you to use. If you guys type in the words "write for us" in parentheses, like not parentheses, sorry, in like quotation marks, and then you add the word like keywords related to field. Let's say you're a database architect, so you put data architecture, right? Or maybe you want to put Microsoft Azure. Maybe that's like your thing, right? You would be surprised at the wealth of editorial publications looking for free content. You start listing all of them down, you start putting together an article and just submit to all of them. You only need like 2 or 3 of them to really take on your opportunity, or at least you can get started by saying like, hey, I got published in one thing, and you can leverage that for other opportunities. Because now when people Google you, let's say you're trying to go into a judging opportunity, they found that you had that one article that you published recently.
Got it. And thank you so much for that sneak peek. I am definitely going to be stealing that right from this call over here. But yeah, I believe Nicole, you have made an excellent point that definitely the stigma when it comes to the O1 visa is that, hey, it's a talent visa, it's a extraordinary ability visa, which definitely makes sense. It is. But having said that, it is definitely something that you would have already done in your bachelor's, in your master's, and so you already have a bit of evidence that you can just keep on building towards by taking what you already have. So that's an excellent point that you made, and it's definitely more achievable than what people think. And I know for a fact that manifest has already helped tons of people get the O1 visa. So on that note, let's talk about timelines, Nicole. I know this can be a very open-ended question, but having said that, if it can give some confidence to the folks who are on the call right now, what can maybe say what does an average timeline look for someone who's just getting started, not someone who's already had a good profile, but maybe just getting started? What can be the timeline that they should be looking for with the O1 visa?
I can tell you that, of course, like you said, it's very wide ranging, but I've seen people be able to build in as little as 2 or 3 months, depending on like where you start. And it can be all the way up to like a year, if not more than that, depending on where you are. So what do I mean by depending where you are? If you're a junior in college, you're on your F1 right now, and you're talking to me, then it's not going to be a 3-year endeavor, right? It's going to be like a multi-year journey of building up your credibility because you're still a young student. But for someone who's coming to me, let's say they're on STEM OPT, right? They've already proliferated their career for 1 or 2 years here in the United States. And maybe this was their STEM OPT postmasters, and they already had a career prior to coming to the United States for their master's education. That's a very different conversation, right? It could be that, hey, you actually already have a lot of material, but we need to just season it a little bit. We need to like zhuzh it up a little bit, do something a little bit more recent, or maybe something a little bit more domestic here in the United States. Or maybe you're only missing one criteria. In that case, sometimes 2 or 3 months might just be enough to get you over that finish line. I always tell every single person who's trying to benchmark themselves on how far away they are, it's really based upon how many years of experience do you have. If you feel very young, right? If you feel that you may only have 1 year of experience, then of course you will have more that needs to be done compared to the person who has that 3 years, 5 years, 10 years of experience.
That makes absolute sense. And yeah, definitely an open-ended question, but I'm sure that would give them a lot more clarity as to how achievable and in what timeline that would be.
Mhm.
The next question which I have for you, Nicole, is actually an extension of the O1 visa and more targeted towards someone who might be on an H-1B or maybe F1, but more targeted, I feel, towards the H-1B folks out there. What's the EB1 visa, and how is that tied to the O1? Maybe are the criteria very similar? And what are the advantages of the EB1? And how can that help people who are out there on H1B and F1 right now?
So the EB1A, I think of it as like the bigger brother of the O1. So it's an extraordinary ability green card. So it is rewarding the same groups of people, which are people who are near the top of their field, at the very top of their field, and have achievements. That being said, that's the biggest difference. The difference between the EB1A and the O1 is that the EB1A, at the end of that whole entire journey and road, is a green card, like permanent residency in the United States. However, in being that bigger brother and having this kind of ultimate gift, let's call it, or ultimate privilege at the end, is a higher level of scrutiny that comes with the EB1A. So you are correct, Sohan, that the requirements for the EB1A are substantially similar to the O1. But they're not exactly the same. To give you a key point, you know how earlier I said in O1s there's O1As, right? And then there's O1Bs, and they have 6 criteria in the O1B, about 7 or 8 for the O1A. In the context of the EB1A, it's just 10 flat, right? It's like an amalgamation or a combination of both the O1A and the O1B requirements. Although personally, I would say the EB1A is more heavily favored to people who have O1As than they are for people who have O1Bs. So how are they related? If you're building up towards an O1A or you've achieved an O1A, you're usually already on your way towards an EB1A because of how similar the requirements are. But the EB1A can help a lot of people because it's the fastest way to get a green card because it's a first preference category. It's not faster than getting married, but getting married, I know, has its own trials and tribulations. So that's a different conversation, to say the least.
No, absolutely. Yeah, definitely very different from getting married. But yeah, having said that, that actually gives a much better clarity because I'm sure people on the call would be in different levels of the journey. So maybe someone can opt for the O1 if that suits them, and someone can actually opt for the EB1 if they are at that stage and it is suiting them, and their priority is getting a green card right now. So perfect. Lots of information over there. I know initially you touched upon the J1 visa as well, Nicole. What's the J1 about, and how can that help people who are joining the call right now?
Right. So the J1 visa is an intercultural exchange visitor visa. All it really means is that the purpose behind a J1 is that you are coming to the United States to not only learn more about the US, corporate culture, and the like, learn new skills, but you're also providing your skills and sharing your cultural knowledge with the people that are around you. But how does it help everybody here? There's many different kinds of J1s. There's subcategories of the J1s. The most well-known one, but it's actually not the one that I want to focus the most on, is the J1 intern or trainee visa. So many of you may have heard of those where if you have a bachelor's degree, you can basically tell the government, I need a 12-month timeline in order to exchange my skills or learn more about the United States. And for trainees, it's 18 months if you have a bachelor's degree and 1 year of experience. However, there is another subset of J1s known as specialist J1s or research scholar J1s that can be extremely helpful for every single one of you. First of all, a J1 specialist is someone who can prove to the government that they have some level of specialization, whether it's through academic study or experience, and they're coming to the US to work for an employer to exchange or provide that specialization here in the US. A good example is that, hey, I built the whole back end for a company in the United States from home in my foreign country in South Africa. I'm now going to come to the United States to implement that technology in the United States, right? So that's an example. But if you're here already in the US, it's that, hey, I'm the most knowledgeable person about this kind of system. I need to stay here in order to establish those processes. J1 specialist is for you, and it's a 1-year visa, but it's renewable. It means that you can keep getting more 1-year extensions. The J1 Research Scholar is another one that's way more powerful. You get a 5-year work visa. And what does that mean is that you just have to prove that you are doing something that is conducting research or pushing innovation forward. And it can be for a private organization. A lot of people think that J1 research scholars are only for universities or like laboratories, but that's not the case. You can get a J1 research scholar visa if you are an engineer or even if you're a financial executive, so long as you can prove that you're going to be doing elements of research here in the United States for the benefit of the employer, the benefit of the corporation. And even more powerful than all of these things is that the fact that there's no lottery system, that's number one. You can apply for it at any time. That's number two. And also, anybody can pay for it, which is number three. Because the H-1B, sometimes your biggest barrier is convincing your employer not only to enroll you in the lottery and sponsor you, but they have to pay for everything, right? I know many of you have probably been through that experience where you went to an employer and they're like, well, I don't mind it. It's just that I don't want to pay all these legal fees and filing fees. And many of you have said to your employer, well, I'll cover the fees, or you can do this and you can do that. And that hurts you because the H-1B doesn't necessarily allow you to do that. But in the J1 context, anybody can pay. And that includes yourself.
Got it. Very interesting information. I had just heard about the term J1. I had maybe not even thought about it so much. I'm like, hey, just another annotation like F1, H1B, and something like that. But it actually is incredibly helpful when I'm learning more about this. And you're so right, Nicole. I've had that conversation multiple times. Whether hey, let me pay for the visa sponsorship, but just like you mentioned, it doesn't work like that. So very curious to know what does the process for a J1 look like. I'm sure it's not like the criteria that are in the O1 or a EB1, but still, having said that, depending upon what kind of critical situation some of the people on the call might be in, what does the timeline look for a J1, and what's the process? What's maybe the documentation required? How can they prove that they can help with the research? What are something when it comes to that?
Right. So at the end of the day, the I wouldn't even say that the biggest hurdle, but the first thing that you have to set aside in order to apply for a J1 is make sure that you have an employer here in the United States. But it's not the same as like regular sponsorship. What happens is this employer needs to be willing to say that, hey, I'm hosting you as a research scholar, or I'm hosting you as a specialist. They need to describe what skills that they need from you and what knowledge that they need from you. That's number one. And number two, they also need to be able to express, especially in the research scholar portion, what kind of contributions to innovation or what kind of contributions of research are you doing? So let's take, for example, an engineer, right? Let's say you are developing something for a cryptocurrency company or like something that has to do with blockchain, right? The way that I would argue it is that in order to develop this new software or to develop these new processes, you need to do some level of research because you're doing something novel or something just different. So that explanation needs to be provided, and it's usually provided from the employer side. Like, what kind of proprietary technology are you guys doing? Like, what are you guys building? That's the explanation that the government's looking for. In terms of like the process, it's actually very quick to get the forms that you need, which is similar to an I-20, weirdly enough, on an F1. On an F1, you apply to the school, you get accepted, you pay the fees, and then you get an I-20. For a J1, the end result is something known as a DS 2019, which functionally is similar to an I-20, where the government says like, hey, like you're going to be part of this company, you're working with this host organization, and you're going to be doing this research scholar stuff. I'm able to get those things done in about 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks at most. It's very fast because the host organizations are incentivized, or at least the sponsoring agencies are incentivized in order to do these processes very fast. I will tell you one downside though. And the downside is that once you get this DS 2019, it's not like you can domestically change your status from the F1 to the J1. There are some pilot programs, there are some organizations that have pilot programs that allow you to do that. Not that many, but what ends up happening is that you get this DS 2019 and you're supposed to go to a US consulate, get the visa stamp, and then come back to activate the J1. Now, I know a lot of you have a lot of risk and you're worried about having to leave the country to do it, but the rates of denial for a J1 specialist or a J1 research scholar, it's actually very low. So I work with two of the largest agencies in the United States that do J1 research scholars and specialists. And between the both of them, they said that they only had about 4 or 5 denials in the last 5 years, right? And for both of them, the denials were based on national security concerns because these were citizens or individuals born in Iran, right? So I think when you're thinking of it from that perspective, not only is this a low use visa category, the specialist and research scholar one, because it has a branding and marketing issue, it's also one that the government seems to want to have here in the United States. You're contributing to research or you're a specialist of some format that's going to contribute to a success of a US company.
Got it. Oh, I am literally very stimulated with all of the information that I'm just receiving over here. But having said that, so helpful when it comes to just as an alternative option to the H-1B. I never knew about this, and it definitely feels achievable, very doable for people who are in a very critical situation out there. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I would tell you the hardest part, because I think it's something that's a little confusing, because I
Mhm,
mentioned it, is like the agency concept. So let me
mhm,
just like, at least walk everyone here a little bit through the process. Let's say I get a client and they're like, I'm interested in doing the J1. I have an employer. It's this startup with like 5 or 10 people, and we're building something cool in cryptocurrency. I'm like, great, fantastic, or like fintech. I would take that person's resume, I would take a copy of their educational credentials, and I would go to an agency. The biggest ones in the United States are CIEE and Cultural Vistas. I go to them and I say, hey, this person is interested in a J1 research scholar visa. They have this employer. Will you be willing to, I wouldn't even say take the case, but would you be willing to serve as the agency sponsor? I've never seen them say no. So it's like 99.5% of the time they're going to take it, unless there's an issue with like the degree or like the education. They'll
mhm,
take it, and then you basically go through this portal or form filling exercise where you give them the information that I described earlier.
mhm.
For research scholars, it's usually a huge explanation about what is it that you're doing research. By the way, you don't even have to culminate the research in a paper. There's no like publishing requirement. It's just like, did you do research, yes or no?
Right.
um, and then we have to give this whole process of an information regarding the company. Where are you going to be working? How much are you going to be paid? It's really a hand holding exercise on my end in building that argument for why this person is doing research, but also filling in information in a portal, submitting it to the agency. And then I help monitor the agency to make sure that they release the paperwork in a timely fashion so that you can go home to your home country, get your consular stamp, and then come back to the United States. So that's like the whole entire process. It's just a introduction to the agency. They take the case. I help with filling out the forms and making the argument that it's clearly a research endeavor of some format. And then you're kind of home free thereafter.
Got it. That's incredible. And yeah, the fact that it helps the administration and the government, and at the very same time helping the research specialists as well, is just phenomenal. So on that note, I have personally so many questions, but I would love for the audience to get their share and ask any questions that they currently have or situations that they're dealing with. So. To everyone who is currently live with us over here, thank you so much. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat, and Nicole would be answering for you over here. So you can start right now, and we'll be very happy to answer. But a last question that I had, Nicole, is something which is being frequently asked to me. For someone who's maybe on F1 or an H-1B, it doesn't really matter, but someone who has entrepreneurial aspirations, or someone who wants to maybe become a founder, can they do something like that by maybe getting an O1? Is that an option that they should opt for? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, but it requires a very special and nuanced argument. So there's a little bit of a misunderstanding within the field about how O1s can be self-sponsored, right? Like I can start my own company and all these kinds of things.
Right.
The government in their FAQs actually say like you can't self-petition an O1. However, it just requires you to consider getting an agent petitioner where we designate a third party vendor or an organization to serve as the petitioner for the application. And one of the job offers that we show or opportunities that you're going to be completing in the O1 is going to be one from your own company, right? So that's usually what I say, it's like a semi workaround, but key caveat here is that the best applications usually have that job offer of my own company that I'm a founder of, and another offer for a consulting gig or something else that is in your area or your endeavor, right? So if you're a software engineer and you're going to be starting your own company, that could be one offer. And the other one could be, hey, I'm doing this side project or helping a family friend's business from time to time. And this is how much I'm earning on that per project basis.
Got it. That makes complete sense. Awesome. On that note, I already see so many questions coming our way. So, Nicole, would you want to pick them, answer them, or maybe just highlight them
Yeah.
on the screen? Mhm.
Yeah, sure. And let's like I'm going to do an easy one really quickly and then we can go back into like the other ones. So this is I think a very relevant one, which is for an OMA, am I allowed to pay for lawyer fees myself and the employer will pay the fee for the petition? The answer is yes. The visas that don't allow you to pay for the lawyer fees and the filing fees are the H-1Bs, the H-1B1s, the E3s, and there's also like perm elements that cannot be paid for by you, right? But in terms of like the O1A, there is no preclusion or there's nothing that prevents you from paying anything or everything for yourself. So that's like a quick and an easy one. But let's go back because I think a lot of people were asking questions while we were on this conversation.
Yes.
But I will say this is another one that I think is relevant. I know that we're talking about alternatives, but I think with everything that's happening with the $100,000 fee, people scared of traveling, it's very much relevant for everyone here. You have an H-1B that's approved in 2023 and a renewal in September of 2026. Planning to have first time stamping in India in March of 2026. For how long will the stamp be valid for, and will it be considered expired once I renew the H-1B in September of 2026? US consulates in India, usually the visa stamp is going to be valid from obviously the date it was issued when you are in the consulate, but it usually ends in the end of your validity date of your current H-1B. So if you're
Mm.
telling me that you're up for renewal in September of 2026, chances are your visa stamp is going to be valid from March of 2026 to September of 2026. So my recommendation is this, and I don't know if your employer is willing to do this or you're open to doing this or maybe adjusting a little bit of your timelines. You should try to renew as early as possible so that you get the brand new 3-year timeline before you go to the consular appointment. I don't know if when you mean renewal in September 2026 means that you're only going to renew that, but usually the earliest that you can renew is 6 months prior to your expiration. So that is March of 2026, but I don't know if you're like the end of March or the first week of March. It's possible to get that new approval before you do the consular appointment. So I would strongly consider that.
Got it.
Right. The next one here, it's interesting, right? The
Mhm.
NIW I-140 petition rejection rates, and I'm so pedantic here. Rejection is not the same as denial, so I'm going to correct it. It's a denial rate, are extremely high. Further to this, the processing times are increasing manifold. So is it futile to file for the NIW till 2028? I don't think it's futile. There are still people who are getting approved. I know that it seems like the hill is so much higher than it used to be because I think a lot of us know like 2022 era, 2023, I feel like if you even like breathe STEM, you were doing anything related to STEM, you were like, congratulations, you have an EB2 NIW, right? You could have been a level one quantitative analyst working at a financial institution on your first job, and it's like, congratulations, you have an NIW, right? It's still possible. It's just that the level of evidence that the government is looking for and proof that your endeavor actually has legs on it and it's actually feasible is just much higher. So if you're a person who genuinely is doing something of national interest and you can prove that roadmap that, hey, more likely than not, when the USCIS officer looks at the magical crystal ball in the next 5 years, that whatever you're doing is actually going to hit the national scale, then the NIW still kind of makes sense for you. We've still been able to get approvals for an NIW. It's just about the proving that it's more likely than not that it's going to rise to that national interest benefit. Next one that we can definitely answer is, I was exploring the EB2 NIW. Is it possible to get some guidance on this? Absolutely. So two things. Obviously, our website at manifestlaw.com actually has a lot of free resources. We provide a lot of free explanations, blog posts, and insights into what makes up an EB2 NIW. So please feel free to go on our website. I'm not asking you to even do a consultation. You're welcome to do a consult because we do provide free consultations as well. So if you want to talk to an attorney and have that discussion, feel free to do so. But I also tell people that it's fantastic that we're living in the era that we're in 2025 in its own way. Technology has gone so far, right? I never want to put out there that ChatGPT and all these kind of things are like the sources of truth. But these applications or like things like Perplexity can start collating sources for you to read. Don't ask GPT to tell you how to do it. Instead, ask GPT to send you sources. I love it as like a deeper search engine or as a research tool, more so than I like it for interpretive guidance. So that's like my two suggestions, at least to get started.
Got it.
Let's see here. If the H-1B wage increase rule comes into play, will it impact existing H-1B workers at the time of the H-1B renewal next year? Will the new wage have to be forced on the LCA? The answer is yes. It doesn't impact existing H-1B workers in the sense that if you're currently on an H-1B, like you just got it this year and it's valid for the next 3 years, it's not like next year you're required to have a raise in order to meet these requirements. No, it's that when you renew and it comes time to submit the LCA, those level wages, those increased wages are going to be reflected on that new LCA. So that's something that a lot of employers are mindful of, but you yourself as an employee should be considerate of as well.
I'm sure many people had that question.
Yeah, I know. Honestly, like us lawyers are like sitting here like, okay, so like when exactly is it going to be implemented? It's probably going to be next year with the updated DOL. Basically, every June 30th, they like change to the new data set for the wages. So I'm anticipating after June 30th, it's going to be the swap.
Got it.
So will scholarly articles be justified for somebody who is professional versus researcher? Yes, right? But I think it goes back to my conversation about what does it mean to have a scholarly article, right? It's nobody is saying that you must be doing research journal. Trade publications are real. You write a very insightful, well-researched blog or article, and you're in fintech and you get it published at payments.com, that's a relevant argument for a scholarly article. It's scholarly in nature. It went through an editorial process through their editors, and right at the end of it, it's that payments.com's target demographic are other industry experts in the fintech space. Right? You use that equation or you use that function and you'll be able to find other ways to meet this category. And if anything, it's much more believable for a professional, right? Researcher, like not a researcher, but if you are somebody who is an engineer, it's actually a little bit abnormal to do a ton of research. You're a practical field. Or let's say you're in medicine, you're an MD, right? Like in what extent would you be doing research unless you decided to become a medical researcher instead of a doctor? You're a practitioner, you practice, you're a professional. So I find that that's a really good way to do it. Right here. I have here, my question is to check if it's the right time to travel while I've applied for STEM OPT parallelly through my organization. I want to question what you mean by my organization. Technically, you're not supposed to work for yourself or your own company on STEM OPT. So let's be very careful about that. Also, don't forget that organizations must be e-verified in order to sponsor for STEM OPT. Now, if your question is when is the right time to travel, honestly, don't travel until your STEM OPT is approved and you have that card in hand. Because the biggest fiasco that can happen is if you get a denial and you're outside of the country. That sucks, right? Or alternatively, you do get approved, but you need the new card to enter the United States to show that approval. Then you're going to need someone to mail it to you, or hopefully like CBP like waves you in. Right now, I try to tell people to avoid traveling while things are pending. You should just stay. It's always better. You're in a more defensible position when you are. Um, let's see here. Does the
Absolutely.
O1A also have a final merits phase? So for many of you who are watching, this question was asked when we were talking about the differences between the O1A and the EB1A. The EB1A has this separate phase known as the final merits determination. So once you meet 3 out of the 10 criteria that the government has illustrated for the EB1A, they basically tell the officer, do this second stage of review where it's like a gut check. Does this person truly feel like there's somebody at the top of their field? Do they have the final merits, right? Are they somebody who has sustained national or international acclaim within their field over a period of time? In the O1A, there is no final merits phase, but there is something known as a totality determination, where the officer is kind of told to gauge in some form or way, like, is there a sustained national or international claim? But they can't make like a subjective judgment call in the same way that maybe an EB1A can. And I think that's what contributes to the high approval rates. I find that O1As have significantly higher approval rates compared to any other category across the board. I think the last statistics that came out is like it's like a 94% approval rate for an O1. So I think that's 100% because of the final merits question. That's there. Let's see here. I don't have an H-1B stamp yet, so will the 100K fee apply when I go for the first time stamping? What will be a good time to go for stamping next year? Guys, the H-1B 100K fee only applies if you filed an H-1B case after September 21st, 12:01 a.m. EDT, and it was filed for consular notification. And to activate that H-1B for the first time, you have to go to the consulate, get the stamp, and come back. However, if you already have an H-1B approved, right, and it was filed before September 21st, you can travel and go do the stamping and there's no 100K fee. And even better yet, let's say you filed a change of status today or a change of employer today and it got approved tomorrow. That's after September 21st. But the government says if you did a domestic filing and you changed your status or you were here for the whole entire process and you get approved, right? And there was no consular notification, you can travel afterwards and then get a stamp. That's fine. It's very interesting how much they rolled so much back between the first announcement until now. But
Right.
I know that I said a lot of confusing concepts, but I think what I want to tell most people is that there's actually a very limited pool of individuals that the 100K actually applies to. The storied example that I give to someone to say like, oh, that definitely applies is imagine you won the H-1B lottery after your bachelor's degree, right? So you were working for JP Morgan for a year or two, and then you decided, hey, I want to do my MBA in the UK. So you get into Oxford, you leave the United States, you leave your job at JP Morgan, you do your MBA 2 years or 3 years later, you're like, I'm done with the MBA. Now I want to go back to the US and work for JP Morgan, right? Can you resuscitate my H-1B? They
Mm,
can, but they have to approve it for consular notification. Why? Because you're in the UK now, right?
right.
You're not changing your status into an H-1B. You're not changing your employer. You're technically filing for new employment from outside of the US. So that is the scenario where that person, even if they previously got an H-1B approved, would need to get consular notification done. And the 100K fee actually applies. So hopefully that was helpful for some of you here.
That makes sense.
Um,
And while we're talking about that, Nicole, you just mentioned very briefly that there was rollback, and there were so many people who are actually very anxious and very scared when it came to this news and the situation. So I receive these messages every week that hey, I want to go back to my home country. It's holiday time and everything. So do you think it is advisable for people who currently are on a F1 or a F1 STEM OPT to go back to their home country, and then they come back safely with the entire uncertainty situation which is going out there?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and I will tell you if you guys want a gut check, it doesn't hurt for you to shoot us an email, see if there's an attorney that you can just make sure that you walk through the whole case history to make sure that the 100K doesn't apply to you. But I've consistently been able to advise companies and their workers, hey, you can go home, right? The 100K fee doesn't apply here. You're going to be good because you already either have a valid visa stamp or your approval was before the 21st or the case was filed before the 21st, or even if it was filed afterwards, it's exempted. If I could show you very quickly, I hope that I think I can share my screen.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because I think this is so helpful for everyone to understand like who applies or who doesn't apply.
Hmm.
This is the one time, like right now, I'm going to say that the USCIS FAQs were actually kind of helpful right at the moment, because with the 100K proclamation, there was so many changes that I felt the FAQs were changing every day. But
Hmm.
let me just share my screen because I think this is going to help a lot of people who are here.
Sure.
If you go on the H-1B page for USCIS, right, and you scroll down to the section where it says Presidential Proclamation on Restriction on Entry of certain non-immigrant workers, so zooming in so people can see.
Hmm.
If you open it, the government actually explains very carefully who is subject and who isn't subject. And they even say, and this is like the part that I think applies to most people, or at least helps the most people. The
Hmm.
proclamation also does not apply to a petition filed at or after 12:01 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time on September 21st, 2025 that is requesting an amendment, change of status, or extension of stay for an alien inside the United States where the alien is granted such an amendment, change, or extension. Further, an alien beneficiary of such petition will not be considered to be subject to the payment if he or she subsequently departs the US and applies for a visa based on that approved petition and or seeks to re-enter the United States on a current H-1B visa, right? So if
Got
you're
it.
ever confused, take a look at this FAQ. If you want more clear examples, uh, man, I love where technology is. Yeah, I have done this before when I'm trying to learn about people's
Hmm.
fields. So a lot of my work when it comes to like EB2NAWs and EB1As, sometimes I'm dealing with very technical fields. Like database
Right.
architecture is so interesting to me, right? Being a solutions architect is like a novel thing, and I don't know much about it. So I have actually asked ChatGPT to be like, explain like I'm a 5-year-old, like why is there the difference between Microsoft Azure, Java, AWS, like what are all these cloud systems? Like I have so many questions, right? But I'm
Right.
not an expert. So in this sense, it's like if that still is confusing to you, just copy that, paste it into GPT and tell it to explain it to you, right?
Mm.
And I think that that's a good way to kind of get at least a little bit more understanding. But again, it doesn't hurt for you to reach out to us, and we're more than happy to walk through the case history and see if it applies or doesn't apply for you.
Got it. Thank you so much for the clarity. I'm sure so many people were very curious, maybe even slightly anxious, but the way that you just mentioned, it makes so much sense now. Thank you for that.
Mhm. No worries. But I think there's one question here that I think is also going to be insightful because a lot of you are on F1s at the moment, right? Or on OPT.
Right.
Does the 100K fee apply to F1 students on OPT, STEM OPT, applying for a change of status to H-1B in the US? The answer is no. The 100K fee does not apply to you according to the USCIS rules at the moment. Essentially, they said if you're applying for a change of status in the United States, the 100K fee doesn't apply to you, and it will not apply to you even after the approval if you choose to travel. So it's, again, that's why it's so limited. Like I don't, like I'm trying to think about the number of people that this impacts, and it's really like a very small percentage of individuals.
Got it.
All right, so I think let's see if there's any other questions that can be very helpful for us to answer.
Hmm.
I think this one is a good one. If high salary or judging criteria are not applicable to my case, what are the other 6 criteria you suggest emphasizing on a priority basis to strengthen an O1A petition? So if it's not high salary and it's not judging, and maybe it's not going to be scholarly articles, right? It could be press. You are allowed to do a press push if you manage to get interviewed at a podcast that's relevant within your field, or you manage to get maybe an influencer to do an interview with you. That's one other way. Sometimes I tell people the starting point is actually to go to your local journalism school. So like if you're in a university network, let's say you're in a big university like Penn State, right? They have a massive journalism school. All of those interns that are trying to get their news story out, or they're trying to do like public interest stories, like they want the free content. So you can like approach them and say, hey, like, are you okay with interviewing me as part of your internship? It's a good start. I highly recommend it. But outside of press, especially for the O1A, I would say that a category that could be worthwhile in investing in is actually original contributions of major significance. Now, a lot of people pause because they're like, wait a second, Nicole, I know that as like the hardest category of all time in order to meet. But I think it's a matter of perspective. I think that if you're a student and you're telling me like, hey, I have the time to start developing maybe a new idea or a project, or invest more time into building something that's impactful, then go do it. Open source projects, especially ones with the Linux Foundation, where it's like utilized in so many different systems and the like, could be helpful. Things on GitHub that get widely shared and thumbs up are great. For those of you who are like in the UI UX design field, or maybe motion design field, Behance can be your best friend. They do regularly award thumbs ups and things like that to show like when people are using things. But outside of original contributions, awards could be another category. You'd be surprised at how much people don't apply for awards. You just need to be nominated and maybe you will win. But it does depend on what field you are in. I find that press is probably one of the easiest to try to achieve if you're able to put in a lot of work and reaching out to journalists and editors and the like. But scaling from that, I actually think that if people invested more time into thinking about what they can do to make an impact in their field, original contributions can be one of those things. Maybe even write a book, get it published somewhere. Okay. I think another question that seemed a little bit, because I think some people were copying and pasting very similar questions, so I don't want to answer the same thing again. I see there's new comments, right? What makes Manifest Law different from Alma, Plymouth, Lighthouse, etc.? So I can tell you, like, compared to Alma, we're actually a law firm, right? Alma does have lawyers, but they're not a law firm per se. So I think that would be one difference. But before I even go into the other ones, I want to make it very clear. I have a very deep respect for lawyers and other firms and other organizations, right? Not every firm is a fit for you. A lot of the times what I tell people is that when you meet an attorney or when you talk to an attorney or a firm, you got to make sure it feels right? Ask them, do they have experience doing this kind of visa type? Do they even know about your industry, right? So going back to like my cloud solutions architect person, right? If you go to an attorney and they're like, I have no idea what that is, or they don't even have the willingness to learn more about what it is that you do, how can they best advocate for you and say that it's a field that you're highly achieved in? They need to have some level of knowledge or be willing to gain that knowledge. When it comes to Plymouth and Lighthouse, I think my understanding when it comes to Plymouth is that they are very, very good with founders, people who maybe are coming out of like the accelerator programs that are out there, and they have maybe really lightning speed turnaround times. But I can't really speak more to that in terms of their processes, because I don't necessarily know them the most well. For Lighthouse, I think it's very similar to Plymouth. But in terms of like, what about Manifest? I think what makes us really powerful is that we have a really large network of attorneys. We're 50-man attorney strong here. We have a lot of people with a lot of industry knowledge in a wide array of areas. I think we take a very strong holistic approach when it comes to cases, but we also have evidence development programs. So what we do have available for those of you who might be trying to build towards an O1, it's actually, hey, I want to know what opportunities would suit me when it comes to judging, when it comes to writing. We can give you those opportunities, or at least give you really strong direction on what you need to be doing in order to develop your way towards that O1 or towards that EB1A. So we have different programs, and I also will say we have really strong money back guarantees. We really put our money where our mouth is. So we have certain plans that allow you to get a 100% money back guarantee in the event of a denial. It does scale. We also have former USCIS officers on our team that do secondary review for certain applications and certain plans, and that can be also a very powerful tool for you to get that feedback.
Got it, and that's excellent. I believe many people found the session extremely helpful, and if if you guys are looking for ways to learn more about manifest, I'm just going to be sharing something right now. And yep, there you go. So if you see a QR code on your screen, we can you can just scan it right now, and you can directly go to Manifest website. And just like Nicole mentioned, I believe it's about the it's not about what are the options available, but it's just about the right fit. And I know for a fact Manifest has helped countless people out there. So yeah, do scan the QR code, and I hope this can help you learn more about Manifest and the services they provide. But yep, that's the session, and that's all we had for you guys. But Nicole, any ending thoughts for people who are facing uncertainty, who are currently on a F1, H-1B? Any thoughts or any last words that can help guide them and maybe guide them towards a better path that's available out there?
Right. I think what I like to close a lot of my conversations, whether it's with people or with the general public in like speeches and all these kinds of things, is that there's a lot of fear right now. I think we're in a very fear-driven market, let's say. It has been a tumultuous year. I will never forget September 19th, when all of those news dropped and we had to tell the world that, hey, there might be this $100,000 fee that everybody has to pay every time they want an H-1B, and apparently it's going to be every single year rather than every 3 years and all these kind of things, right? But don't let that fear overwhelm you and prevent you from doing something about your life here in the United States, right? Sometimes with fear, you close yourself off and you think, you know what, it's never going to be good enough. I'm not that open AI researcher who's making 1.2 million a year, living my best life in a company that's the most well-known right now. But that doesn't mean that you're not extraordinary either. And it doesn't mean that you can't build yourself to get into those criteria. I think my personal motto is I think everyone is capable of being extraordinary. It's about whether or not you decide to do something about it.
Right.
So don't let the fear get to you, because it's going to stop you from starting those Lego blocks that you need to become that extraordinary talent that the government is looking for.
That's beautifully said. And yeah, thank you so much for just ending on such a high note, and thank you so much for the plethora of information that you've already shared in the last 1 hour. I personally learned so much, and I'm sure the audience did as well. So thank you so much, Nicole. I know how busy your schedule gets on a daily basis, but thank you so much for taking the time out, and thank you to the people who joined us today. And I really hope that this was helpful for them. So thank
For
you so
sure.
much, everyone. I really appreciate it.
All
Thank you.
right. Take care, everyone. Thanks for having me, Sohan.
Of course. Have a good day, guys. Bye bye.
You too.